This video is about eyelet buttonholes, and I just did an article for Cast on Finishing with Confidence where I discussed this, and I wanted to do the video while it was fresh in my mind. When you do an eyelet buttonhole, or actually a yarn over buttonhole is probably a better description of it, it leaves an eyelet. You use a yarn over to make it. A lot of the instructions that you will see in books will tell you to work up to the location where work up to 2 stitches before the location where you want the yarn buttonhole. Knit the 2 stitches together, then make a yarn over and go on. And I always have problems with this. I had difficulty envisioning where I wanted the buttonhole to be, and often I would get them wrong. And so how I make them is I work up to where I want the buttonhole to be, the stitch that I want gone. And I've got 9 stitches here, so I've got 4 here, 4 here, and this is the stitch that I want to get rid of to do my buttonhole. And so what I do is I make my yarn over there, and then I knit the 2 stitches together. Now, another reason that I prefer this method is that I'm really funny about maintaining stitch patterns and things, and I like to have, let me work a knit row after this and I can show you more what I mean. I like to have the stitch pattern kind of maintained, and it's not very important for stockinette because stockinette, but I just like the looks of this better, and I'm kind of a detail person, so that's why I make mine this way. Okay, here we go. Now, when you make a decrease, 1 stitch is on top of the other, and when I make a knit 2 together, the stitch to the left is on top of the stitch to the right, and that's what gives it its slant. And when I do a yarn over buttonhole, since this is the column that is replaced where the buttonhole is, I prefer to have the stitch that goes up alongside of those buttonholes be on top of the stitch that I've replaced for the buttonhole. It's a very small thing, but it is the way I prefer to do it. Now, this buttonhole can be used in any kind of stitch pattern. Garter, seed stitch, moss stitch, anything that you might be using for a band, you can use this. Now, you can do it the other way around, and if I did that, I would have done my knit 2 together here and then done my yarn over. It would have left the buttonhole in the same place, but it would have left the stitch to the right, which is where the buttonhole is, on top of the stitch to the left, and I stitch to the left on top of the stitch to the right, and I just don't like that look. I really like to see this column of stitches maintained all the way up. I don't like to see it interrupted by this pattern. And I'll just go ahead and do a buttonhole right here so you can see what I mean. I'm going to do my yarn over and then do my, my knit 2 together and then my yarn over. And I've got funny buttonholes here, but you can see what I mean when I do the next row. Now, the time when this is very important isn't so much for stockinette or reverse stockinette or wherever you're going to have this buttonhole. It is important if you are doing ribbing, and I'm going to show you that next. So let's look at this first. And you can see that the stitch where the buttonhole is going to be is on top, and it breaks this column of stitches. On this side, that column of stitches runs up. This column of stitches is already broken by the fact that there's a buttonhole there, but this just looks kind of tacky to me. Again, I'm a detail person. Now, when it really looks tacky is if you're doing it in ribbing. So let's say I'm doing the method where I do my knit 2 together 2 stitches before where I want the buttonhole to be. And here's 2 stitches before where I want it to be. I do my knit 2 together, and then I have my yarn over, and you can see that this really is going to interrupt that stitch pattern. I've got the purl stitch on top of the knit stitch, and it just is going to look tacky. So in this instance, even if you do it the other way, you do your knit 2 together and then your yarn over, you do not want to do it for this. I do my yarn over, I knit those 2 stitches together, and the stitch pattern isn't interrupted. I'm going to have a purl there and 2 neat column of knit stitches. And again, in the blog entry, you will see that I have photos and describe this in detail. Whoops. Now the other way that I can do it, if I do like the method of working 2 stitches before where I want my buttonhole to be, I can use an SSK, and we'll go ahead and work one of those just so you can see. Up. There's where my buttonhole is going to be. So if you do want to work 2 stitches before where the buttonhole is going to be, if that's easier for you to visualize the location, then what you want to do is you want to use an SSK decrease. So I'm going to work up to 2 stitches, let's say to where I want my buttonhole to be. And I want my buttonhole to be there. What I can do is I can do an SSK. SSK, and that is going to keep that column of stitches nice and neat. Then on my yarn over there. And again, I'm going to have much clearer photographs that you can see in the blog entry itself.